Good evening, everyone. Please stand for the national anthem of Antigua and Barbuda. Thank you. You may be seated. Good evening once again to everyone. My name is Tahiva Packet, the president of the Antigua State College Student Council, and this evening I am granted to introduce to you our moderator, Mrs. Caroline Thomas Parker. Mrs. Caroline Thomas Parker is a competent public servant. She is currently the city manager at the St. John's Development Corporations. She is a former media personality and worked at the government-owned ABS radio and TV stations as news reporter, current affairs officer, television news anchor, and program producer. Mrs. Thomas Parker is also a former moderator of the National Interschools Secondary Debate Competition. She's also a former lecturer in communication studies at the Antigua State College A-Levels Department. She holds an Associate of Arts in Journalism from State University of New York Empire State College, Bachelor of Arts in Journalism Humanities, summa cum laude, first class honors from the University of the Virgin Islands, and a Master of Science in Tourism Policies and Management from the University of Birmingham, England. She also holds a myriad of other diplomas and certifications in other concentrations. Ms. Thomas Parker is married to Trevor Parker. She has been blessed with two daughters, one of whom is deceased. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mrs. Thomas Parker.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the final debate of the Leeward Islands Debating Competition 2023. We have St. Martin coming up against St. Kitts this evening. And first of all, let us congratulate both teams on making it to the finals. We'd like to acknowledge our special guests this evening, and up front and center, we have Dr. Curtis Charles, who is the Dean of Academic Affairs at UE 5 Island campus, and we also have Mr. Claire Brown, who is our Director of Education. We also have as well in the house the principal of the Antigua State College, Dr. Najel Buffon, as well as other colleague, lecturers, and anybody who I would have missed this evening who's of importance, forgive me, but we all welcome you. And also, we welcome our viewing and listening audience who have joined us live via ABS television, and also our visitors who are here with us to witness this exciting encounter. I would like to first bring on stage our debaters this evening before we continue. And we would like to start with the proposition. And I'd like to invite from the St. Kitts team. Oh, sorry. I have St. Kitts, I'm sorry. So proposition, St. Martin. We'd like to invite Adio Williams. and he's our first speaker. And the second speaker, Pooja Ramkripal. We'd like to invite the opposition team, Senkit, sorry, and the first speaker, Kayla Butler. And the second speaker, Hadassah Coffee. Our moot topic this evening, the Caribbean failure to take mental health seriously has caused irreparable damage to families and communities. We'd like to continue by introducing our esteemed judges. And the head judge this evening is Mr. Sidney Rettemeyer. Mr. Sidney Rettemeyer is a born Guyanese living in Antigua for the past 33 years. He's a father of 3, a mentor for young adults, and presently works at the American University of Antigua Counseling Center. Academically, he has achieved his master's in mental health psychology out of the University of Liverpool and was also awarded the status of a registered addiction specialist out of California in 2014. His main line of occupation is in the field of mental health and addiction counseling, which complements his theological credentials obtained since the early 90s. Mr. Rettemeyer is also engaged in part-time counseling sessions where he conducts individual, family, and couples therapy sessions. Apart from individual sessions, he is also conducting lectures on areas like spirituality, mental health, and addiction. He's a motivated speaker and is currently a CC member of the local Toastmasters Club. Mr. Rettemeyer believes that most of his understanding today is derived out of his personal experience, strength, and hope that has connected him with the art of living. He enjoys working with people and achieving therapeutic alliances to achieve better psychological health. His hobbies are freediving, fishing, cooking, and gardening. His favorite quote is by Cynthia Oselli, which says, "For a seed to achieve its greatest expression, it must come completely undone. The shell cracks, its insides come out, and everything changes. To someone who does not understand growth, it would look like complete destruction." Mr. Sidney Rettemeyer. Our next judge is Dr. Jackson Charles. Dr. Kelly Jackson Charles teaches in the School of Humanities and Education at the UE Five Islands campus. She has a PhD in Higher Education Administration from Morgan State University and a master's degrees in both special education and school administration from Fayetteville State University. She has teaching certifications from Harvard University in higher education, teaching and learning, and media and technology in education. She is currently enrolled in the Masters of Computer Information Technology program at the University of Pennsylvania. She has taught K-12 for over 15 years and served as a building principal and district administrator in the United States of America. She also served as a tenured associate professor of education, director of institutional effectiveness, and director of accreditation and assessment in higher education institutions. Her research interests include integrating media and technology in the classroom, differentiated instruction, teaching exceptional children, student learning outcomes assessment, and specialized and regional accreditation. Dr. Jackson Charles has a number of books, articles, and successful grants on education and student learning. She's married to Dr. Curtis Charles, and they have 4 children and 4 grandchildren. Dr. Kelly Jackson Charles. Our third judge is Mr. Adrian Lewis. Mr. Adrian Lewis, born in Bella Forma, or Tobago, which means beautifully formed, and a citizen of Antigua and Barbuda. Adrian Lewis is the second of 4 children born to Murray and Ven Lewis. He loves reading, dancing, listening to different genres of music, playing basketball, volleyball, football, swimming, hiking, traveling, and DIY, do-it-yourself projects. He holds a diploma in ministerial studies from the United Theological College, Bachelor of Arts in Theology from University of the West Indies, Mona, and a master's degree in education with emphasis on assessment, educational leadership, and research from the Oasis University. He also has certification from the Department of Community Health and Psychiatry, UWI Mona, for drug and violence prevention, treatment, and rehabilitation. He is a husband and father of three. Currently, he's one of the guidance counselors at the Clear Hall Secondary School and provides private counseling and other services with the intention to foster and empower clients to learn, grow, and give. Mr. Adrian Lewis. Our next judge is Miss Petra Williams, and her task this evening is to judge the best speaker and the overall speaker for the debating series. Miss Petra Williams represents an electric mix of professional pursuits and passion. Her professional composite includes economist, statistician, risk analyst, business consultant, logistics specialist, and tutor. Through her professional engagements, she has worked with international agencies in various capacities, regional companies and organizations, and a range of enterprises and organizations in Antigua and Barbuda. Her passion includes researching and sharing stories of the people, the arts, and culture of her homeland, Antigua and Barbuda. She actively encourages learning more about Antigua and Barbuda via her website under the moniker Petra the Spectator. In the context of this event, the Leeward Islands Debating Competition, she is a past advocate with the distinction of 2 Best Speaker Awards and being part of the 1990 winning team Antigua and Barbuda. She went on to represent her Block G and Mary Seacole Hall successfully during her studies at UWI Mona. She is a special features contributor on various media, on economics, finance, and sociocultural issues in Antigua and Barbuda and across the region. She currently serves as advisor to the Minister of Trade and as a media consultant. Miss Petra Williams. Our timekeeper this evening is Mr. Kamali Manix. Thank you. Okay. All right. So now that we have gotten that bit of housekeeping out of the way, we are going to go into tonight's debate, and we will share with you a bit of the criteria for tonight's judging. The debaters will be judged on content and presentation. In content, soundness of points, 35 points, logical development, 20 points. And for presentation, you have audibility and clarity, 15 points, posture and personality, 15 points, and command of language, 15 points, for a total score of 100 points. In the rebuttal, they will be judged on recall of points, 10 points, recall and general analysis of debate, 14 points, ability to refute the opponent's points, 20 points, and spontaneity, 6 points. And that's a total of 60 points for a grand total of 160 points. Our debaters this evening will have the first speakers from both teams will have 10 minutes to present their argument, and the second speakers will have a total of 7 minutes to present their argument. And for the rebuttal, they will both have a total of 5 minutes in which to present their arguments. Our moot topic this evening again, the Caribbean failure to take mental health seriously has caused irreparable damage to families and communities. And we will go straight to our first speaker on the proposition, and he is Mr. Adio Williams. And Adio, you have 10 minutes to make your presentation, And you will hear on your ninth minute, the bell will ring to indicate that you have 1 minute left for your presentation. Mr. Adio Williams.
Murder, suicide, trauma, extreme bodily harm. These are some of the irreparable forms of damage caused by mental health disorders such as depression, sociopathy, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, OCD, paranoia, PTSD, and many more. Though these are not exclusive to the Caribbean, they are directly linked to the Caribbean's failure to take mental illness seriously. Madam Moderator, honorable judges, worthy opponents, esteemed colleague, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My colleague and I are here to assertively and unapologetically propose the moot. The Caribbean's failure to take mental illness seriously has caused irreparable damage to families and communities. By way of definition, and for the purpose of this debate, allow me to define the key terms of the moot using the Merriam-Webster Unabridged Dictionary. Mental illness is defined as a mental condition marked primarily by sufficient disorganization of personality, mind, and emotions to seriously impair the normal psychological and often social functioning of the individual, also called a mental disorder. Failure is defined as a lack of success, while on the other hand, the term irreparable damage means permanent harm or injury that cannot be repaired or undone. Moderator, having carefully evaluated the key terms, the moot essentially states that countries in the Caribbean region have taken mental disorders lightly, and it has led to dire consequences for individuals, their families, and the communities they reside in. The main issues that I will address in my speech tonight include the damage from the mental health crisis in the Caribbean, the stigma of mental illness in the Caribbean, the lack of access to mental health services in the Caribbean, along with the catastrophic situation that the Caribbean mental health failure has caused. My attentive audience, the mental health crisis in the Caribbean is indeed irreparable. Money has been mismanaged, lives have been lost, and mental and physical scars have been gained. The damage caused cannot be undone. These damages include disability, substance abuse, incarceration, suicide, murder, and poor quality of life. Madam Moderator, allow me to elucidate how the mental health crisis in the Caribbean has caused the damage. There is a combination of cultural, economic, social, and political reasons which explain why the mental health crisis in the Caribbean has long been neglected. The socioeconomic situation has allowed for poverty, income inequality, and unemployment to become deeply rooted in degrading mental health. Ladies and gentlemen, Bhavik Doshi, a research and impact officer at Nesta, pointed out that very little is spent in the Caribbean on mental health. As he stated, and I quote, on average, a country from the Caribbean only spends 4.3% of its healthcare budget on mental health. This is unsurprising as economies are structured around 2 or 3 key industries, which means that mental health is left underdeveloped. End quote. Ladies and gentlemen, need I say more? We as a Caribbean spend money on infrastructure, tourism, and any and everything but mental health. How are we to develop as a nation if the mental health of our citizens is not up to par? Globally, 1 in 10 people suffer from a mental disorder. It's also important to note that according to the World Bank Organization, the average national healthcare budget in the Caribbean is already a minuscule 7.95%. It is therefore evident that the Caribbean region has failed miserably with its pitiful 4.3% of an already minuscule 7.95%, which makes it comprehensible why mental illness has long been neglected and why it causes irreparable harm. Madam Moderator, this irreparable harm is further worsened by the stigma towards mental illness in the Caribbean. According to the Surgeon General's report on mental illness, mental health stigma is the most formidable response to the progress in the arena of mental illness and health. It is unfortunate that individuals in the Caribbean region still view mental illness as a personal sign of weakness or moral failure. This stigma acts as a barrier preventing individuals from seeking the help they need, further leading to the deterioration of their mental health, causing irreparable damage. The World Health Organization assessment instrument for mental health systems supports our claim that this stigma has resulted in a significant number of mental health problems which go undiagnosed, unreported, untreated, and in turn, understudied. This moderator has caused irreparable damage to the mental health situation in the Caribbean. Compounded on the stigma issue, the lack of access to mental health facilities in the Caribbean is a significant problem. Many Caribbean countries have limited resources, and mental health is not seen as a priority. Studies have found that one of the main barriers to mental health treatment is simply a lack of mental health available resources, which is caused by a combination of high demand for treatment and the low supply of trained professionals. The US Department of Health and Human Services claims that today, more than half of adults with a mental illness in the US, a total of 27 million people, do not receive the mental health care they need. The lack of access to mental health services means that individuals who suffer from mental health issues are left without proper care, support, and treatment. The Pan American Health Organization, in a 2019 study entitled Care for Mental Health Conditions in Jamaica, concurs that mental health disorders are a leading cause of disability and a major contributor to the burden of non-communicable diseases in the region. The same source identifies a lack of access to mental health resources as a problem. Yes, my listening and viewing audience, the damage caused by the Caribbean's failure to take mental health seriously is dire. The impact of the Caribbean's failure to address mental health on families and communities is catastrophic. Suriname and Guyana are 2 countries with the highest rates of suicide in the world. In the Caribbean region, the percentage of people with a mental disorder varies from country to country. Generally, that number ranges from 10% to as high as 20%. 20%, that's 1 in 5 people. Such an alarming statistic. It is also noteworthy that according to wisevoter.com, out of the top 25 countries in the world with the highest murder rates, 52% are Caribbean and Latin American countries. Moderator, how then can my opponents question if it is indeed a Caribbean failure? It is clear to see a connection between mental illness and the irreparable damages known as suicide and murder. My listening audience, it is time for the Caribbean region to take mental illness seriously. The magnitude of the problem is evident. Mental and neurological disorders account for almost a quarter of the disease burden in Latin America and the Caribbean. Mental illness has also been linked to crime and death. Can any of us in this room tonight magically erase stigma or repair suicides and murders already committed as a result of mental illness? No, none of us can. Therefore, you must join me and my teammate in defense of tonight's moot. The Caribbean's failure to take mental illness seriously has caused irreparable damage to families and communities. Moderator, the proposition momentarily rests.
Thank you very much. That was Mr. Adio Williams, the first speaker from the St. Martin team. And Mr. Williams presented his argument in a time of 9 minutes and 51 seconds. We will now go to the first speaker of the opposition, Senkits, and we invite Kayla Butler. Kayla, you have 10 minutes to make your presentation, and on the 9th minute, you will hear the bell to indicate that you have 1 minute left to present.
Moderator, distinguished adjudicators, worthy opponents, colleague, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My teammates and I stand in firm opposition to the moot. The Caribbean's failure to take mental illness seriously has caused irreparable damage to families and communities. Permit me to define the key words and phrases to establish the parameters of our argument. The American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders defines mental illness as mental health disorders that affect mood, thinking, and behaviors, and which evolves into mental illness when ongoing signs and symptoms constrains one's ability to function. The Caribbean refers to the territories washed by the Caribbean Sea. Failure to take seriously is defined as a lack of consequential attention. Caused irreparable damage means resulted in irremediable injury. Families and communities refers to the people who live in one area and share blood and/or emotional ties, common interests, values, attitudes, and behaviors. These definitions were taken from the Oxford Encyclopedic Dictionary. Paraphrased, the moot reads thus: the lack of consequential attention paid to mental health disorders in the territories washed by the Caribbean Sea has resulted in irremediable injury to people who live in one area and share blood and/or emotional ties, common interests, values, attitudes, and behaviors. Moderator, let me immediately concede the obvious. There appears to be some truth to the proposed moot, as with the major developments surrounding the subject, mental health or mental illness has emerged as a serious problem. Still, sobering though that reality may be, we cannot allow ourselves to be carried away by emotion and gross exaggeration. If we believed that irreparable damage to families and communities in CARICOM societies is due to our failure to take mental illness seriously, we would be deluding ourselves. Note well, the moot does not say a significant failure or even one of the primary failures. No, the assertion is that it is responsible for the damage. And so I must beg to differ. First of all, moderator, the attitudes toward mental health have changed drastically. Renowned psychiatrist Professor Freddie Hickling noted, and I quote, The physicians who set up the mental health system in the Caribbean in the 19th century were all Britons doing colonial service, carrying out the civilizing mission of the British Empire, end quote. Hence, the public policy idea of treatment of mental challenges by custodial care in asylums is an archaic idea that was oppressive from its inception. Mental health care encountered the psychological impact of 500 years of European racism and colonial oppression. Hundreds of thousands of Caribbean people were incarcerated indefinitely in the notorious madhouse or lunatic asylum, with over 2,000 incarcerated patients and sometimes subjected to barbaric treatments such as electroconvulsive therapy, as stated in the article Owning Our Madness by Freddie Hickling, 2020. However, the language of mental health has changed. We have moved from terms that describe the mentally ill as possessed, para, lunatics, etc., to euphemisms that inherently consider the feelings and humanity of victims. Our language reflects our changing attitude, and so now we speak of a mental disorder or the mentally challenged. Can we still argue, then, with such mental shift that the damage to families and communities is impossible to rectify? Moderator, if only attitudes and language had changed, we would have made great strides. But let us examine concrete or practical efforts to take care and treat persons with mental health concerns. These go as far back as the 1800s. Professor of Psychiatry Dr. Frederick Hickling in 2018 stated, and I quote, "The emancipation of slaves in 1834 was accompanied by an increasing administrative response to health needs. How did one territory respond to the need? The turn of the century saw the construction of 8 hospitals in Jamaica, each of which contained an annex for the treatment of the mentally ill," end quote. Now, this awareness of the need to include treatment for the mentally challenged is in no way a failure to take mental illness seriously. Instead, it is a laudable effort to show that mental health is one of the first issues the Caribbean tackled. Fast forwarding to this century, let us look at the ideals of the PAHO Strategic Plan 2014 to 2019, which outlines specific lines of action such as, I quote, number 1, develop and implement policies, plans, and laws in the field of mental health and mental promotion to achieve and appropriate an effective governance. Number 2, improve the response capacity of systems and services for mental health and for the care of psychoactive substance-related disorders to provide comprehensive, quality care in community-based settings, end quote, just to name a few. Moderator, these lines of action have successfully inspired new legislation that allows patients to be attended to at their own homes, introduces psychiatric care to general hospitals, and even ensured evaluation of these institutions. These community-driven initiatives are improvements on the institutionalized mental hospitals of the time as more research was being done into social and community psychiatry. Furthermore, legislation such as the Mental Health Bill of Guyana, passed in 2022, no doubt inspired by the PAHO Strategic Plan, aimed, according to Honorable Dr. Frank C.S. Anthony, Minister of Health, quote, "The standards that this bill allows us to set would pull us out from the dark ages of how psychiatry was practiced back in the 1930s to the modern world. And therefore, this bill is essential for us to move forward and to modernize the practice of psychiatry and to protect our patients who are affected by mental health disorder," end quote. This is just a single example of the Caribbean's push to improve mental health institutions and services. Thus, the Caribbean has not only recognized the cruciality of mental health and its effects, but has acted on it. With evidence of this telling, how can the proposition expect you to believe that the Caribbean has completely failed to take mental health seriously? In addition, it is undeniable that there has also been increased awareness among individuals and organizations who dedicate their time and resources to combat the stigmatization surrounding mental illnesses. Moderator, not only governments, but there are organizations geared towards individuals and families of the mentally ill that have stepped up and developed goals to diminish stigma and prevent discrimination. This is the case with a group that focuses on recovery, the Mental Health Caribbean, based in the Caribbean Netherlands. This organization supports their patients in the comforts of their own home, allowing them to be surrounded by family and friends while they recover. This proves the Caribbean's consistent support and advocacy for the mentally disadvantaged in our communities. Also, grassroots community organizations and local NGOs, such as the Guyana Foundation and the Swana Path, fill this void. And despite their informality, the results are impressive and display the power of community cohesion and resilience. Moderator, if the damage caused by mental health were irreparable, then why are these organizations still tirelessly working day and night to provide their services to their communities? Are we saying that they are wasting their time? I am sure if they knew or felt that their efforts were futile, they would have ceased operations centuries ago. Moderator, efforts since the 20th century serve as precedents for what the Caribbean has done to better the mental health of its population. There have been great leaps in this journey to revamping this sector of healthcare. Moderator, our message is clear. Mental illness is not taken lightly in the Caribbean. Instead, both governments and organizations have for decades been taking the necessary steps to address mental illness and continue to find ways to improve the mental health of the Caribbean people. My colleague will complete our argument by turning your attention to the many social ills that are the actual source of the irreparable damage inflicted on families and communities. In the meanwhile, I boldly reiterate our claim: the Caribbean's alleged failure to take mental illness seriously has not caused irreparable damage to families and communities. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kayla Butler from the opposition, St. Kitts. And Ms. Butler presented her argument in 10 minutes and 25 seconds. We will now turn again to the second speaker of the proposition, St. Martin, and we will call on Pooja Ramkrapal. And Pooja has 7 minutes to present her argument, and you will hear the bell ring on the 6th minute to indicate that you have 1 minute less.
I wish people could understand that the brain is the most important organ in our body. Just because you can't see mental illness, like you could see a broken bone, doesn't mean it is not as detrimental or devastating to a family or an individual. So says Demi Lovato, an American singer, songwriter, and actress. Madam Moderator, honorable judges, worthy opponents, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. The proposition has returned, resolute in our stance, that the Caribbean's failure to take mental illness seriously has caused irreparable damage to families and communities. My teammate presented sound arguments in defense of the moot, as he highlighted the damage, the stigma, the lack of services, and the catastrophic situation that the Caribbean mental health failure has caused. Now, I am here to bolster our argument by addressing the following points: the impact of mental disorders when not taken seriously, the inadequate funding for mental health programs in the Caribbean, and the lack of education and awareness about mental illness in the Caribbean. The State of the World's Children 2021 on My Mind, promoting, protecting, and caring for children's mental health confirms, even before the pandemic, children and young people carried the burden of unaddressed mental health needs. The latest available estimate suggests that 15% of children and adolescents aged 10 to 19 in Latin America and the Caribbean, around 16 million, live with diagnosed mental disorders. Every day, more than 10 children and adolescents lose their lives to suicide in the region. Imagine the irreparable damages. Stigma towards mental health, neurological, and substance disorders is prevalent throughout Latin America, the Caribbean, and the rest of the world. It is a major contribution to morbidity, disability, and premature mortality. It is also one of the main obstacles in improving care for those afflicted. Basically, these disorders were not taken seriously. Therefore, they cause severe damages. Governments know this and they are not doing anything to improve it. According to Thomas Stephen Zaz in his book, The Myth of Mental Illness, he confirmed, and I quote, "The mental health was not taken seriously in the past. The mentally ill have been treated very poorly. According to the Pan American Health Organization in 1990, it was estimated that psychiatric and neurological disorders accounted for 8.8% of the disability adjusted life years in Latin America and the Caribbean. In 2004, that burden had grown to 21%. However, the treatment gap, sick people who remain untreated, exceeds 60%. Given the above mentioned information, it is clear that the Caribbean must take mental illness seriously by financially investing in mental health. If not, my intelligent audience, this could cause irreparable damage to families and communities at large. Madam Moderator, public mental health is also highly influenced by global events, such as the COVID-19 pandemic and increasing international migration. Yet, despite the increasing burden of mental illness, mental health systems are a low priority in most countries globally. Added to that, there is a prevailing gap in funding and resources for the treatment of mental health problems. Moderator, mental illness can have a significant impact on the economy, as individuals who suffer from mental illness are often unable to work, which leads to lost productivity and lost income. This in turn results to a strain on the economy, the community, and the individual, as they are also unable to take care of themselves and provide for others. Furthermore, the cost of treating mental illness, including medication and therapy, can also be a significant burden on families and the healthcare system, since they are not getting any assistance from the government. According to the World Health Organization, mental health disorders are a leading cause of disability and a major contributor to the burden of non-communicable diseases in the region. UNICEF confirms that there is limited investment in mental health, just 1.8% of public spending. In their research, UNICEF continues to confirm that governments and societies are investing far too little in promoting, protecting, and caring for the mental health of children, young people, and their caregivers. Moderator, without treatment, the consequences of mental illness for the individual and society will be staggering. Mental health issues do not get better on their own. The longer an illness persists, the more difficult it can be to treat and recover. Untreated anxiety may escalate to panic attacks, and failing to address trauma can lead to post-traumatic stress disorder. This is why funding and resources are necessary for treatment. Early treatment usually leads to better outcomes. Finally, I would like to address the lack of education and awareness about mental illness in the Caribbean. Many individuals in the Caribbean are still not aware of the signs and symptoms of mental illness, and as a result, They are unable to identify and address mental health issues in themselves or others. This lack of education and awareness also contributes to the stigma surrounding mental illness, making it even more difficult for individuals to seek the help they need. This shows the Caribbean's failure to take mental illness seriously, which will eventually cause irreparable damage. In conclusion, the Caribbean's failure to take mental illness seriously has indeed caused irreparable damage to families and communities. The economic impact, inadequate funding for mental health programs, and lack of education and awareness about mental health are just a few examples of how this failure has had devastating consequences. It is now time for the Caribbean region to take mental illness seriously and invest in resources, funding, and education to help those who suffer from mental health issues. I leave you with the following quote by Eleanor Roosevelt: "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." Let us not give in to the failure to take mental illness seriously, and let us work together to create a brighter, more supportive future for those who suffer from mental health issues. We rest our case. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Pooja Ramkrapal, from the second speaker from the St. Martin team, the proposition, and you spoke in a time of 7 minutes and 15 seconds. We will now turn to the second speaker from the opposition, St. Kitts, and we call Hadassah Coffey. Hadassah, you have 7 minutes to make your presentation. And on the 6th minute, you will hear the bell to indicate that you have 1 minute left. Hadassah Coffey.
Moderator, adjudicators, members of the proposition, ladies and gentlemen, colleague, a pleasant good evening to you all. My leader has previously and ably demonstrated that, contrary to the moot, the Caribbean's failure to take mental illness seriously has caused irreparable damage to families and communities. Our region has long and deeply invested in mental health and well-being. I will now further support her position by bringing focus to the true factors and underlying causes that undermine our Caribbean society. Moderator, violence in its various forms, domestic, sexual, and political, just to name a few, offers a profound challenge to the Caribbean. In fact, violence has long plagued our countries, Antigua, St. Kitts, St. Martin, resulting in millions of injuries and hundreds of thousands of deaths per year regionally. For example, in 2021, the highest homicide rate among 22 Latin American and Caribbean countries was in Jamaica, with around 49.4 murders committed per 100,000 inhabitants. I refer you to the Jamaican Observer. Moderator, we contend that it is the high incidence of violence rather than any perceived failure to take mental illness seriously that inflicts irreparable damage on our families and communities. Among those we hold near and dear, the resultant harm causes bonds to break down and exposes us to extreme grief, whether due to loss or injury. And in our neighborhoods, residents are fearful. They are scared to go to school. They are worried at work, and they are weary even while shopping at the supermarket. So it is no surprise to me that the United Nations article, Crime Trends in the Caribbean and Responses, notes, and I quote, on average, more than half of the people in the South America and the Caribbean report fearing violence, end quote. Clearly, moderator, the prevalence of violence far outweighs any alleged failure to address mental illness. Furthermore, moderator, there are incidences of drug trafficking that are ever present in Caribbean countries today. In recent years, Caribbean authorities have seized thousands of kilograms of narcotic drugs, 435 kilograms in Grenada, 500 kilograms in Jamaica, 5,000 in St. Martin. The unfortunate truth is that the Caribbean's unwritten role as a point of drug transshipment contribute to greater drug use, substance abuse and addiction, gun crimes, and corruption. Moderator, youth in particular risk falling victim to this criminal enterprise. As stated by the International Criminal Police Organization, quote, the end users and addicts are often the victims of a powerful and manipulative business, end quote. So yes, moderator, mental health issues may abound, but moderator, the Caribbean's response to mental illness cannot be blamed for the irreversible detriment to our families and communities when drug trafficking does far more harm. And let us not forget about the effects of the endemic corruption, which has inflicted penetrating, irrevocable damage on Caribbean peoples. Whether high-level parliamentarians or lower-level civil servants, corruption has wormed its way into the annals of Caribbean leadership. So much so that some of our peerless leaders have either gone to jail, such as Donville Innes of Barbados, for instance, or have had no other recourse but to resign, such as Andrew Foy of the British Virgin Islands, for example. To quote the conference paper entitled Sustainable Development Goals, Peace, Justice, and Strong Institutions, and I quote, corruption diminishes state capacity, nations fail to eradicate poverty, address hunger, secure good health and high-quality education for their citizens, guarantee gender equality and other human rights, and reduce inequality, end quote. Moderator, clearly corruption fuels nefarious activity in society as proceeds can be laundered, funding can be disguised, and judicial officials and politicians corrupted through bribes, including gifts, favors, and many other benefits. As a result, levels of violence, illegal drugs, prostitution, sexual slavery, kidnapping, and intimidation rise drastically. Moderator, isn't it then logical to conclude that endemic corruption, drug trafficking, and crime are far more to blame for the irreparable harm to Caribbean families and communities rather than failure to address mental illness? Interestingly, in the World Economic Forum's 2022 Global Risk Report, Caribbean countries identified the top risk facing their people and communities where they pointed to the proliferation of illicit economic activity, extreme weather events, digital inequality, employment and livelihood crises, prolonged economic stagnation, infectious diseases, and the collapse of systemically important industries. However, ironically, failure to take mental illness seriously was nowhere on the list. And mind you, this was not because we are negligent, but because we are better at management. So, moderator, while mental illness cannot be overlooked, the notion that a lack of consequential action to that ill causes irreparable harm to our societies simply cannot stand up to scrutiny. I therefore boldly contend the Caribbean's failure to take mental illness seriously has not caused irreparable damage to families and communities. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hadassah Coffey, the second Speaker of the Opposition from the Senkits team, and she presented her argument in 6 minutes and 43 seconds. We've come to the end of the prepared speeches, And next, we will be going into the rebuttals. But permit me at this time to remind you of the criteria for the judging this evening. And on the onset, I did not give you the details for the judging of the best speaker and the overall speaker. So allow me to do that now. For the best speaker and the overall speaker, that will be determined by one judge only, which is Ms. Petra Williams this evening. The rebuttal is not considered when judging the best speaker. Only the winners of the best speaker of each debate qualify for this award, which is the overall best speaker. And it is not necessary for a debater to have debated more than once or to be on a winning team to qualify for this honor. So in judging the best speaker and the overall best speaker, audibility and clarity, you have 15 points. Articulation, 15 points. Voice modulation, 10 points. Command of material, 10 points. Persuasiveness, 15 points. Fluency, 15 points. Eye contact, 5 points. Body language, 15 points, for a total of 100 points. And for the general judging, you have for the prepared speeches, you have on the content, soundness of points, 35 points, logical development, 20 points, and for presentation, you have audibility and clarity, 15 points, posture and personality, 15 points, and command of language, 15 points, for a total individual performance score of 100 points. For the rebuttal, we will be heading into next, you will have recall of points, 10 points, recall and general analysis of debate, 14 points, ability to refute the opponent's points, 20 points, and spontaneity, 6 points, for a total score of 60 points. The grand total for both sections, 160 points. At this time, I'm going to ask you, the audience, to give us complete silence as the debaters will get 5 minutes to prepare for the rebuttals, and that 5 minutes will begin now. right. Thank you very much. We're back again, and we are at the last stage of this evening's debate. And a reminder of the moot point, the moot topic: the Caribbean's failure to take mental health seriously has caused irreparable damage to families and communities. Are we ready? Yes? Okay, so we will call on Miss Kayla Butler of the opposition, and you will have 5 minutes in which to present your rebuttal. As usual, again, you will hear the bell ring on the 4th minute to indicate that you have 1 minute left to make your rebuttal. Kayla Butler.
Moderator, honored judges, worthy opponents, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good evening to you once again. Moderator, do not be bamboozled by the theatrics presented by my opponents, who up to now have yet to prove that the Caribbean's failure to take mental illness seriously has caused irreparable damage to families and communities. They stated especially vague assumptions and failed to convince us of their validity. Firstly, I would like to briefly point out how both of our opponents continuously express that there is a link between mental illness and other issues such as murders and chronic diseases. However, they did not explain this apparent relationship. Why? Because there is none, and it is just another baseless claim by our opponents. Furthermore, our opponents express that the Caribbean has not made mental illness a priority. It would be an absolute atrocity to deny the shift in attitude Caribbean people are having towards mental health. For example, leaders are continuously drafting new legislation. Look at the Trinidad and Tobago Mental Health Act, revised in 2016, Suicide Prevention Bill in 2022 in Guyana, and the Anguilla Mental Health Act, revised in 2006. All consisting of promising plans and initiatives which aim to lessen stigmatization, create more mental health centers, widen the scope of psychiatric services, and much more. Moreover, our opponents expressed a lack of resources are put towards mental health. However, will they ignore the Caracas Declaration and the Havana Charter in 1995, both contributed to reorient the mental health system? Community centers were designed to train and organize human resources in mental health all over the country. Furthermore, organizations such as the Jamaican Psychological Society, JAMPSych, and the Trinidad and Tobago Association for Psychologists, TTAP, for example, are valuable institutions which can assist the public in identifying resources within their community to address individual mental health concerns. Additionally, our opponent stated that stigmatization is a major obstacle to mental illness. The proposition continues to remain bliss in their ignorance, as they have not acknowledged the impact of advocacy on diminishing the stigma. Many persons and organizations spend their time and resources on destigmatization. For example, the Healthy Caribbean Youth Organization, who are committed to prioritizing, destigmatizing, and normalizing mental health among our Caribbean children and young people. Moderator, the advocacy of leaders and various organizations has and will continue to annihilate the stigma surrounding mental illness in the Caribbean. Again, Mental Health Month and Day are observed every year all throughout the Caribbean, and these events seek to champion and encourage mental health holistically. Moderator, in the interest of time, the opposition opted to only address a few of the baseless arguments presented by our proponents. Thus, it is with unwavering surety that the opposition firmly reiterates its stance that the Caribbean's failure to take mental illness seriously has not cause irreparable damage to families and communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that was Miss Kayla Butler of the opposition, St. Kitts, and Kayla presented her rebuttal in 4 minutes and 7 seconds. We will now turn to the proposition team, St. Martin, and we will call Adio Williams. Adio, you have 5 minutes to make your presentation, and you will hear the bell ring on the 4th minute. Adio Williams.
Good evening again. I've returned, resolute in our stance, to rebut the improper and misguided statements of our opponents. The opposition clearly didn't understand tonight's mood. All my teammates and I had to do tonight was present one case where harm caused by mental illness could not be fixed. We outlined murder, suicide, death, incarceration, and other forms of irreparable damage. The first speaker of the opposition stated, and I quote, in her definition of mental health, that mental health constrains one's ability to function. If one's ability to function is constrained and so negatively impacted, how then can you learned opponents try to insinuate that this is not causing irreparable damage? Secondly, she stated that there's some truth to the mood, and the mood is essentially an emotion and gross exaggeration. Gross exaggeration? How is it that the opposition views the millions struggling and severely harmed by mental illness just a gross exaggeration? This goes to prove our point on stigma. People with mental illnesses are often seen as exaggerating, and the opposition seems to also believe this. Thirdly, they were quoted as saying that the mental health that the mental illness crisis is responsible for damage. How then, if they stated this, can we question, is the Caribbean responsible? Look at the statistics, moderator. As high as 1 in 5 Caribbean people have a mental illness. And this is clearly related to the high suicide and murder rates in our region. Fourthly, the proposition stated that the language towards mental health has changed. Apologies. The opposition stated that the language towards mental health has changed. When and where did this happen? Not in the Caribbean, I know. People still believe that mental illness is just some created delusion, and therefore they label people who are mentally ill as crazy or cursed. The proposition mentioned improvements and increases. Apologies again. The opposition mentioned improvements and increases. Improvements and increases do not equal success. If there is a lack of success, there must be a failure. Violence in its various forms plagues our countries. That's one of the points that was brought up by the opposition. Violence is related to mental illness. Clearly look at the evidence. Countries with the highest rates of mental illnesses have the highest rates of murder and crime. As stated before, moderator, 52% of the top 25 countries in the world with the highest murder rates are Caribbean and Latin American countries. Therefore, you must agree that it is a Caribbean failure. The, cor- the opposition mentioned drug trafficking. My opponents may not have known or have maybe failing to research that mental illnesses can be triggered by drugs. Moderator, the drug trafficking problem and mental illness problem go hand in hand. Thank you.
Okay. 21 seconds. Thank you very much, Adio. And Adio Williams, you rebutted in a time of 4 minutes and 21 seconds. Esteemed audience, we have come to the end of the formal part of tonight's debate. We will kindly ask our judges to go off into privacy so you can come back with the good news later. Okay, a reminder of who our judges are this evening. We have Mr. Rettemeyer, Sidney Rettemeyer, who is our lead judge. We also have Mr. Okay, hold on there, please. Let me get my notes. Mr. Adrian Lewis, Dr. Kelly Jackson Charles, as well as Ms. Petra Williams, who will be judging the best speaker and the overall speaker. It is my duty at this time to engage the audience in some stimulating discussion while we await the judge's decision. And let me on the onset congratulate both teams for a very good job this evening. This evening, as you are quite aware, we debated the topic, the Caribbean failure to take mental health seriously has caused irreparable damage to families and communities. And there were some very interesting points which were brought forth by both teams. You had the proposition who were in favor of the team, and then the opposition who was against the moot. So at this point in time, if there's anyone in the audience who would like to make a contribution, you may have an observation or you may have some other thing to say other than what was presented this evening. Do you think that could I have some quiet, please? Thank you. Don't want to sound like a teacher, but sometimes you all need to learn to behave. All right, so the Caribbean failure to take mental health seriously has caused irreparable damage to families and communities. Is that so? Are we doing enough, or can we do more, or have we done nothing, or, do we still have various issues? As the young man said, is there still stigmatism? Do we call people crazy? Do we call them curse? Look, that crazy woman day, look, that crazy man day. And then we scoff at them and we don't do anything to try and, help them or, bring any sort of assistance to them? Do we shun them? When they come into church, while you're nicely dressed up and everything, and they come into the congregation, do we, scoot over because we don't want them to sit next to us because we think that whatever it is that's wrong with them, we may catch it? It's a non-communicable disease, so we can't catch it. So I'd like to hear from our very well-learned members of the audience. We have lots of you. We have lots of scholars seated among us. So you must have something to say. I don't want to sound like the teacher and start to call people. But yeah. So who can we call on to start us off this evening? Roberto, oh yes.
Yes, the name is Roberto Celestino Arundel. It is very important, the Celestino, because it's my cultural name. My father was from the Dominican Republic. I would like to say that I had a case within my family. My brother, Raphael Arundel, he died now. And yes, he was liming with the wrong folks, and they were testing LSD. And it didn't react well with his body. And what happened when he was injected? He went crazy. And the so-called lock him up, in those days it was the crazy house. And foreverly known, my brother was deemed crazy. Although he came out of the crazy house, he was crazy. So instead of looking for help for him, they send him home to the same place they found him. He went back to the same crowd. And the fact that he didn't want nobody to call him crazy, he acted as if he was good. Start smoking marijuana and crack cocaine. That made him more crazier. So this time, they didn't pick him up for being crazy. They picked him up for using
Drugs.
crack cocaine and marijuana. So he was in and out of jail because when you use crack cocaine, not marijuana so much. I don't use marijuana, so I'm professing that it is good. But every time he came out, they no longer examined him for the disorder that he had. Oh, he a crackhead. And that is generally how it is happening in our society. I've been a teacher for over 40 years. And one of the biggest things, also been an executive director, and one of the biggest things when I suspend a student and told them to go to the counselors, they ain't going by she because she going to put her melee on the road and they call me crazy. That stigma still exists in our society. You ain't going by no crazy house. You ain't going by no crazy people. Even if you and your wife have problems, me ain't going by no counselor, no. Because I good. Unless that stigma goes, we will be foreverly crazy. And our government don't think that is a big problem. In St. Martin, they're doing something about it. They have the new board for mental health issues. They are making known that mental health is very important, and they are making the people aware of mental health. But if the people go accept it, it is up to them. Because we need to change our attitude. We need to look at Roberto Celestino Arundel, because sometimes I do act crazy, and tell them, you got to go to a crazy house. You understand? And that is our problem. When you tell somebody they have to see a counselor, they think they have to go to a crazy house. So I think we should make going to the counselors a little more friendlier, okay? And some of those counselors are bad too, because they're a bad talk to children. But we have to make that awareness where our counselors, especially in the school, act responsibly. Because I basically say every one of us got a little crazy in us. Because the quietest of the person can walk up to Laverne, give her a slap, and she wouldn't know. You understand? And the awareness that we have to do is very important. I started out with my brother. My brother eventually was diagnosed as in Aruba they call it a trawler. What do you call it in English? A drug addict. He became homeless. He needed food. The people in the community gave him food, but he still thief from them. He even thief the plate and the spoon. And he was beaten up because he stole the plate and the spoon. Instead of seeking help, he went under a shelter, and like me, he had diabetes, got a diabetic attack, and died. So my brother didn't die of mental illness, he died from a diabetic attack. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I see somebody standing up from, is it St. Kitts? Anguilla, I'm so sorry. Yes? There's a young lady there. Yes.
Anguillians are very smart, they're my neighbors. And I'm an Anguillian both by my father, mother, and my mother, mother.
Oh, jeez.
So the Anguillians would call me a belonger.
Good night. My name is Cece Walker, and
Hi, Cece.
like Mr. Rebuttal said, sorry, my apologies. I'm from Anguilla.
Yeah.
So, I agree with the mood. The Caribbean's failure, well, to an extent, the Caribbean's failure to take mental illness seriously has caused damage to families and communities. Okay, so it's not that the government hasn't tried to do things to combat this issue. Don't get me wrong, they have tried, and I commend them for passing bills and all sorts of movements to help these people and give those that struggle in these areas a voice. But it's not enough. Passing these bills alone won't always work, because we see this, okay, you could pass a bill, right? But it might not reach the people, because all of us can relate to this. We all have that one person in our village that is a bit, missing some screws, right? And and we see that we see them parading around the road and talking to themselves and just going crazy. And some of us provoke them. Some of us make a joke, we mock them, we do all these bad things to them, but we don't know the story behind that. And the more we do this, it kind of separates us as a people. It creates a us versus them. We are labeled the sane and them the insane. So as the Caribbean, our goal is to come together and create unity, right? And when we set these people, when we set our brothers and sisters aside, we are not coming together. We are drifting further and further away from being a big family, and we need each other in the Caribbean, you know? So I just feel like a lot more can be done. It's not enough.
Okay, thank you so much. And that is true, you know, in every society you have that, or those sets of people. I remember growing up, there was this guy named Pickup Jimmy. I don't know if anybody remember him. He's still alive up to today. And I don't know what it is that Pickup Jimmy is doing, but he's outliving everybody else. And then there's this other guy who at about, between 5:30 and 6 o'clock, he walks from Freeman's Village to town. And you have to be careful that you don't knock him down, because then you would be responsible for anything that happens to him. You know, and when you see these things, you know, you feel bad about it, because what are we doing as a society? What are we doing to try and reach out, you know? So really and truly, I think we really need to do more. Yes? Oh, we have two people here? Oh, okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nicole Williams. I did not remember to say it last night. We're thinking about the mentally ill. We're talking about those that we see obvious patterns of social misfit caused by psychological disorders. But do we know that there are persons amongst us that are very good at disguising their mental illnesses? Mm-hmm. Do we know that these persons are on a very high spectrum? And we are nowadays talking about, oh, you're a narcissist, or your husband is a narcissist, or your wife is a narcissist. And we hear these new terminologies. And we hear about this new term everybody is using now that you used it yesterday. I don't remember it. But at the moment, we have persons who suffer from narcissistic personality disorder. I recently learned from speaking to a psychologist in our country, Dr. Tamika Lambert, and she made it known to me that in her studies, she realized that not many persons are trained to detect these persons because they are the smart, crazy people. We live with them. We work with them. They constantly, daily, consistently impose on us irreparable damages psychologically. How many wives go to bed at night crying because of the emotional trauma that their narcissistic husband impacts them with? How many children are children of parents that suffer from narcissistic personality disorder? We have a lot of persons studying psychology, and I challenge my young people, because 28 years ago, I was as young as you. But I did not think to pursue my studies in psychology. I have a daughter that is 17 years old, and she said, Mommy, I want to be a psychologist. And I asked her why. I can't share her story because I'm live, I think, and I have to respect her privacy. But when we talk about irreparable damage, a child that suffers sexual abuse at 4 years old struggles with that through their entire life. Sometimes the damages can be repaired, but sometimes the victims do not live long enough for us to see that recovery. That's my case.
Thank you. This lady, Roberto, she wanted to say something.
Well,
Yes.
she took my sentiments, so I wanted to say that. But
Yes.
other than that, I would like to commend both of the proposition and the opposition on a job well done. You guys did an amazing
Yes,
job, both parties. And what I also wanted to say is that, in fact, yes, a lot of us around us do not see that high-functioning people are suffering from mental illness. You know, I, have the privilege to have done my bachelor's, my master's, and the person that I looked up to, the person who have helped me, is now suffering from mental illness. He cannot find a job, and that saddens me. It breaks my heart, because he also has a PhD, and today, no one will hire him just because he had a mental breakdown. So, you know, we don't realize that we always look at people on the road, but there are also scholars that are suffering from mental illness. People who overstudy, people who have challenges from their parents, forcing them to become the best academic, the highest grades, and all of these type of things. And we have to be mindful and conscious of those things as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Another interesting point I'd like to throw at the audience is we recently came out of COVID-19. I mean, recent because we had 2 years, 3 years. Sometimes you wonder, you know, we hear about COVID. COVID is still happening. Yes, it's still very much a part of it. We hear about China now. The other day, something bubbling up again out of some lab. Something else is coming. So, you know, it'll be interesting to know how COVID-19 affected mental health. Because I'm sure during that whole period of the lockdown, I felt like I was going crazy.
That's another debate.
You know? Yeah, so, yes, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gwyneth Williams, and I have been a registered nurse for the past 45 years in Toronto, Canada, as well as a mental health nurse for over 15 or 20 years so far. Now, the topic tonight, I must say, is an excellent topic. It's one of my pet peeves. I like mental health nursing due to the fact that, you know, there's so many people, you know, that are so intelligent, and most of the time are basically intelligent people are down with mental illness, like bipolar disease people, and it's because they're so intelligent, their brain goes off, and so forth. However, I really think that we could do, the West Indies could do, the Caribbean more or less could do a better job in terms of helping these people, because they're brilliant, a lot of them are brilliant, a lot of them need help. I've seen them walking up and down the place, and just a simple care, simple medication, and empathy, you know, they could go a long way. And most of the time it's because they're not being helped. And if they're being helped, you know, you would see the big difference in giving them their medication and, you know, and placing them in institution where they can get help. Now, mental health is on the rise now for young people, depression, and like you say about COVID. And because of the COVID, we see that the mental health issue has been on the rise, especially among young people. They're depressed, and most of them have PTSD problems. And as you know, in the past, it has been a stigma, and it's still a stigma for today, because no one wants to know that their children has mental illness. And that's nonsense. So there should be some awareness to bring to the community in every place. The physician should be, when they go to doctors, physicians should be observing them and knowing that these people are a bit depressed. Instead of, they may go there physically, but they can see disorders in them, you know, during their examination. Don't leave it undone. Oftentimes, even parents should also be aware how to detect the symptoms of mental illness so they can help their children. Unfortunately, I have a relative who was a brilliant young lady, and because of mental illness, just went unobserved and unnoticed, she killed herself. Right. You know, and these are things that are happening in the Caribbean. And I see in Toronto, where I worked, right, the drugs, sometimes marijuana that people take, it also contributes to disaster, because sometimes they may think the marijuana is safe, but it's not safe. Most of the time it's laced with drugs, and it causes psychosis, and based on the psychosis, they usually kill themselves as well too. if they don't catch it on time. Medication, you'll be see these people who are walking up and down that are talking to themselves all the time, just by a simple drug like chlorpromazine or clozapine or something like that will set them straight. But we need to take the time and help these people. And like someone was saying about this, the person who helped her, you know, what? Yeah. Yeah. If he would get the proper care, you know, you'd see their whole again. And you'd be surprised to see these people who are walking up and down and talking to themselves. If they were placed in an institution where they can get help, they would be just like you and I. Because they're smart people. And we need to come and get that awareness. We need to have that awareness, all of us, you know, each and every one of us, we need to help them because they need help. They're calling out for help. And most of the time, their family reject them because they call them crazy. Yes. And society also reject them too. They don't want to be with them because they're crazy. Yes. And that shouldn't be the point. Because mental health is just like a sickness like diabetes. It's like heart attack. It's just that your brain is sick and it needs help. So there's no need for us to stigmatize anyone based on mental health.
Thank you. I have a question for you, but you spoke about them just getting the necessary assistance that they would need. But do you think that it might be a fear of institutionalization, whereby you know you may have a problem, but because if you go to an institution to seek help, then you would be stigmatized. People then say, oh, yeah, hear what happened to she? She had to go down to the, mental home and she had to be warded there. And then as a consequence of that, you're then viewed differently. And another question, since you're a mental health expert, I want to ask you, was about, we often only think of the things that we see, but what about when people get older? What about dementia? Dementia also is a form of mental health, because that is one area which you really need to look at, because all of us will at some point in time get older, and it is an issue psychologically.
As far as I know, dementia is not really a form of mental health. It's more a form of blood issue, in terms of like you have a stroke and it eventually turn into that. Diabetes and all these blood issue related illness can cause, and you can end up getting dementia. It comes down the line, as far as I know. And you said what was the first question you asked?
The fear of being institutionalized.
The fear of being institutionalized. Most of the time, if they're treated properly and be nice to, they cannot understand why, and they never think that they have a sickness. That's the first thing. And you're unable to explain to them because of their brain is so messed up, in the sense that they do not have that understanding, they do not have that awareness. They're usually paranoid. So if you can help them, sometimes it's difficult to treat them. But if sometimes you have to force treatment upon them. And once you get them to start taking the medication, you'll see the difference. They start to have some clarity in their brain and they'll be able to understand. But most of the time, they do not like to take the medication based on the side effects that occur with the medication. Oftentimes, they're like in a zombie atmosphere, like attitude. It usually causes severe weight gain and stuff like that. So most of the time, they don't want to take it. They never think that something is wrong with them. But if you can get them to take the medication, big difference. They're like you and I.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Interesting. Thank you.
I would like to answer that question too. In St. Martin, you would see people walking on the road, and you will wonder why government don't pick them up. My uncle was one of them. Yeah, a lot of people crazy. And what they told me, what the government told me, he will want to go to an institution. They could not pick him up until one of us became his guardian, and he had to sign for that. So he never went to the institution.
Okay. All right.
No, it's right down there first.
Okay, this young lady here, Roberta.
No, the young man here in the blue was first.
Okay, all right. I yield to you then.
You give me the job.
I won't take it back, you know.
Okay, so good evening again, everybody. I think everybody knows my name by now. It's been said about 5 times. So I want to look at it from a different perspective, from the perspective of a teacher. So you asked a question about COVID-19, which automatically struck a chord. Because one of the things that I noticed is our students faced extreme burnout when they came back to school. So let's look at what they went through. They went through the first set of lockdowns, which is like February, March of 2020, where they were told stay at home for months under these 24-hour lockdowns. Of course, they had to go to school online, and hot mess express, by the way. And all that was wrapped up in it. Of course, they were at home trying to battle with the fact that some of their parents are now unemployed. Parents didn't know how they're going to provide for them. They had to deal with, of course, the stress of family members and friends dying, the social exclusion. I can't go by my friend. I can't go by my cousin. Well, they weren't supposed to. Some of us still did. Us. I can't lie. But we weren't supposed to. Yes? Then we went through that kind of sticky period where it was sometimes they were at school, sometimes they weren't at school. Then if there was a spike in cases, they were told to go back home. Then a random decision came, all of them come back to school. And I saw multiple things. One, particularly those students that were in 5th form, whose 3rd, 4th year, 3rd form and 4th form year was completely interrupted, could not function when they came back to school. They did not get the opportunity to go through that full secondary school experience. You know, they're coming back to school and essentially facing baptism by fire. We haven't completed the syllabus. We haven't completed the SBA. And they're going to school 8:30 to 1:30. Every single day is an after class. On weekends, they have after class. Their parents are stressing them. And so they went through burnout. Some of them went through depression, and some of them just collapsed. I remember one day having a 5th form class and walking into the class. And they had just had maths, which I understand. I got a 3. Leave me alone. I understand. But I went into the class and I saw their face. And I said to them, hear what? We ain't doing no learning today. I brought my Bluetooth speaker and I just played like chronics and all that and just allowed them to relax for the double period. And what I saw is that by the next class when I came back to teach them, which is maybe like 2 days later, from the time I walk inside of the classroom, okay, so we're ready. Because they got that opportunity to just relax and release and unwind. And it made a difference. But the sad thing that I often see is there's often this thing where, especially in the public education system, teachers should be trained to see mental health problems. Teachers should know when something is wrong with a child. The reality of the situation is a lot of your teachers are going through mental health problems. Not in a bad way, in terms of their mothers and fathers. They're persons who are expected to pay mortgage and APWA bills. And if you're Antigua, you understand the story of APWA. But anyways, and so a lot of them come into classroom with their burdens, with their faults, and with their deficiencies. And then to go into a classroom with children who are battling the same thing, it is extremely difficult and hard to do. And the unfortunate thing is, when we talk about support for individuals in the education system, it's usually the focus is always on the child. Which I remember saying on radio, if you have a whole teacher, you have a whole classroom. Because I will walk in and I will give my all. If you have a teacher who's stressed, burdened, depressed, and you have an incomplete teacher, you will have an incomplete classroom. And so I think, particularly in the public education system, we need to figure out how we can shift to really looking at what are the mental health problems of not just children, but of teachers. Because that COVID-19 tingy, I personally enjoyed it. I stayed home for 3 months and got paid. Praise God. But then, now that we've come out of it, we need to start looking at it seriously because I have some students and I'm just like, asylum. But that's another story.
Thank you,
A
Kamali.
round of applause.
Well, the good thing about it, Mr. Mannix, is that your Director of Education is seated right up front and center, and he would have heard you. And probably he could give, a comment or two. When this young lady is finished, I'm calling on people. You're refusing, but you can comment, holistically, not comment on Kamali's comments, but holistically. Go ahead, young lady, yes.
Hi, good night, everyone. My name is Shadesia Green. I was one of the debaters from last night's proceedings of Team St. Kitts. And I just wanted to say, I'm hearing a lot of people jumping on the same ship, and a lot of the arguments have been similar, but I feel as though we're straying and we've forgotten the moot. The word irreparable, in the moot, it's a key word, and a lot of us have been saying, oh, the Caribbean can do more, and we don't disagree. The Caribbean should do this and that. But isn't that indicative of you believing that the damage has not been irreparable? It's almost as if the arguments presented, oh, we ostracize people, we as individuals call them crazy. It's almost as if we're arguing a completely different moot where it's families and communities have caused irreparable damage to persons who have mental illnesses. That's just my contribution. I just feel as though we need to remember the keywords of the moots. Thank you.
I'm just gonna continue, add on a little to her. What we are arguing tonight isn't that damage hasn't been done to families or communities as a result of mental illness, but rather that all the damage done, I can't call the word. I'm sorry. All that damage done isn't as a result of just mental illness. You pointed out drugs. Isn't it safe to consider that the mental illness was triggered by the use of drugs and therefore the accessibility of drugs in your country rather than okay. There was a lot of generalization also. Miss, somebody pointed out narcissist, censor, and there was a lot of generalization of people not being able to function, people with mental illnesses not being able to function in society. And that's not true. There are people with anxiety, aka me, and a lot of other decisions, a lot of other illnesses, and it's a spectrum. Mental illness is a spectrum. There are people who can function really well and live with it and do better than most of us in this world. And there are people who need the extra help, all of them need help of some sort. We all need help, but there are people who need specific programs, specific help.
Thank you so much.
The judges are back.
The judges are back, and thank you so much, Roberto, for... Thank you so much for your kind assistance. And our judges, they've returned, and it means that we have some good news lurking around somewhere. But before we go to hear from our head judge, Mr. Sidney Rettmeyer, I'm going to call Miss Petra Williams, and she's going to judge the best speaker for tonight's debate.
Good evening, everyone. It is the finals, and the presentations tonight were certainly worthy of finals. Please join me in congratulating four speakers for their presentation. Just a few remarks. Do I need to remind of the criteria again? No? Beautiful. Yes. Okay. Just a few very brief remarks. I would like to note for this evening, I found the four presenters to be very calm and focused in their presentation. Very, very calm and focused. I was very appreciative of that. And tonight, the organization of the material was very noticeable. It was very smooth and, for the most part, very compact together. I must mention Miss, let me get her name correctly, Miss Ramkripal, that's the correct pronunciation, yes, for packing so much into her 7 minutes. When she was done and I ticked off the points she made, I was like, 7 minutes? What? Yeah. So commendations for that. I also must overall and also speak to the language, the topic, and the debaters got their language appropriate to the topic this evening. I thought that was also very commendable. And I just wanted to mention that as well. So, without further ado, it's not about me. Tonight's best speaker is from the proposition. They always do this. Wait, I'm almost there. Miss Pooja Ramkripal.
Congratulations, Pooja Ramkripal, on being adjudged the best speaker in tonight's debate. We will now call on our head judge, Mr. Sidney Rettemeyer, to give the judges' comments and the results.
Good evening. Good evening, one and all. Good evening, representatives from the education. Good evening, students. Good evening, audience. And more importantly, good evening to the opposition and the proposition. Let's put our hands together again for them. I think they did quite an amazing job there. As a mental health practitioner, this is the first time I've been in a forum as this, and I feel very honored, even to hear the substance and the material that has been deliberated this evening. It has given me much hope and understanding, and I'm sure that there's none of us who could leave this room without at least having a little more understanding of what mental health and mental illness really dictates. The team and I, we met and we did have some discussion, and some of the things that did come up was that we were, again, truly impressed with the presentation this evening. We were impressed with the research. We thought the research was compact. Both teams did the research. And you recognize the confidence each person was just really confident about. They were really, they presented as though they knew what they were talking about. And there was no doubt that lots of time and effort had to be placed into what was shared this evening. We spoke about the command of their reading and even the times with the eye contact. And something came up, and that was, at one point it was different to differentiate whether we were talking about mental health or mental illness. And I think the differentiation could have come up some more. as to what mental health is all about, because when we talk about mental health, we're talking about well-being. We're talking about wholeness, that sense of living and living productive and happier lives, as opposed to what mental illness was all about, right? Also, some more could have been mentioned. One person I thought mentioned about the pandemic, but we all could agree that after the COVID-19, after that happened, that I shouldn't say after because it's still going on, but during COVID-19, you know, I could, as a practitioner, I know that there were quite a lot of bombardment in the mental health field. People suffered, people struggled, and are still struggling over, you know, the issues that were formed, whether it's the economic issues that happened during that period. So we thought that some more could have been mentioned about that, also through the extreme weather and what had happened. But in the rebuttals, again, we looked at it and we thought that they were very strong. And believe me, I thought it was very difficult to judge, because looking at each person, their presentation, it was concise, made sense, and I feel hopeful for the future of mental health in our region. We also thought the timing was good, the confidence, and the assertion. And yet again, I would just like you to put your hands together for the two teams. And the moment we've all been waiting for. The scores were tallied. And the results are in. Scores tallied, the opposition came in with 627 points and the proposition 690 points. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sidney Rattimeyer, for bringing us the judges' results. We are still not yet finished. Jubilation, excitement. Congratulations, Team St. Martin, on an excellent win. Congratulations as well, Team St. Job well done. Okay, we will call again Miss Petra Williams, and she will judge the overall best speaker.
Okay, an important bit of housekeeping. Organizers, next time make sure that the moderator and I are about the same height so that we can just transition easily, you know, without the changing of the mic. Or maybe just tell me I can wear some heels. I don't know. I will get my height and work it out with them, with whomever else. All right, that was just to break the ice. All right, I'll be very quick. So we've had 3 debates for this series. 3. I was here. 4 teams, 3 debates. I was here from the start. And before I get into the meat of the matter again, please join me in giving a round of applause to all of the speakers. And notwithstanding that I have 3 debaters from whom the overall best speaker will be chosen, I just want to congratulate all of the speakers. You all bravely stood before the audience, live and beyond, and made your arguments, and there is no doubt that you would have added to the body of Leeward Islands debating competition, and please use this as another platform to continue to build. Our region needs more speakers. Our region needs more persons who can articulate and defend and argue well, and it augurs well for us in our region that our young people are doing so well. I have to put that on the record. Okay, to the matter at hand. Debate number 1, best speaker, was Miss Lake. Miss Lake, are you in the audience? Just stand for those who weren't here. Yes? All right. Your strengths were your audibility and clarity, and you were very articulate, and you connected with the audience, and so those are the main points from the criteria that you edged everyone out with. Second debate, Ms. Haynes, best speaker. The punchline. I still can't forget the punchline. Those of us who were here remember her punchline, right? What was it? We are doomed. You have to get the, yes. Body language, persuasiveness, and she was also very articulate. And this evening's best speaker, Miss Ramkipal, I think I said it earlier when I was amazed by how much content she got into her 7 minutes while remaining calm and reasoned. She was also very fluent, and thus, by an edge, the overall best speaker for the Leeward... Listen, y'all go outside. The overall best speaker for the 2023 Leeward Islands debating competition is Miss Pooja Ramkripal.
Thank you very much, Ms. Peter Williams, for Thank you. Thank you for judging the overall best speaker, and we say congratulations to Ms. Pooja Ramkapal for being a judge, the best overall speaker, as well as best speaker for tonight's final debate. Well, I think we have actually come. Ms. Kentish? Is there anything else that we need to do? Are we doing any awarding or anything? Should I ask you to come forward? Okay, all right. So I'd like to call Dr. Najel Buffon, principal of the Antigua State College, and Miss Anita Kentish, who is our academic affairs officer.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. This is the time we have all been waiting for. So I'm going to call the Director of Education to come and assist me. We're getting officials. So this is Mr. Claire Brown, our Director of Education. Give him a round of applause. He has been here for every debate, cheering and supporting everyone here tonight. Okay. All right. So for debate number 1, Caribbean countries should prescribe the 1/3 of parliamentary representative must be female. The winner was St. Martin. Can I get a member from Team St. Martin to receive your award? Let's give her a round of applause. Debate number 2. Efforts to reverse climate change are doomed to fail. The winner for that debate was St. Kitts. Can I get a team member from St. Kitts, please? For the final debate, the Caribbean failure to take mental illness seriously has caused irreparable damage to families and communities. Now, I know if I say the winner is St. Kitts, Mr. Arundel will catch a fit. So, St. Martin. Well done to both teams. Okay, so now we are going to announce the best speaker. For best speaker for debate number 1, it's from Team Anguilla, and her name is Maya Lake. The best speaker for debate number 2 is no other than Kajana Haynes from Team Antigua. For the final debate, the best speaker was Pooja Ramkripal. And Ms. Pooja Ramkripal, we have something else for you? So she also wins the overall best speaker. Now, the last award is called the George Irish Award. This year's award is given to someone who has poured their heart and soul into debate. This person no longer works at their prospective college, where they were very instrumental with the debating society. Though they have retired from being a debating coach, their love for the sport keeps them coming back. We are pleased to present this year's award to Miss Charmaine Richardson. Keep clapping, keep clapping. Keep clapping, keep clapping. This is such a well-deserved award. If it wasn't for Mrs. Richardson, we would not have been here. She holds the society, not only in Anguilla, but with all the teams. She is the one that says, find that person, find that person. Are you not behaving? A phone rang, and she gave the person a look, and all of a sudden the person was this tall and came down to this small. So thank you very much, Ms. Richardson, for your contributions. Now, when I read this bio, well, not bio, when I read what this award was about, I was very cautious in how I worded it because it fits not only Ms. Richardson, but somebody else. So I'm going to ask Kamali Mannix to come, a former debater for LIDC, to present the award to the second person who will win this George Irish Award.
Should I tell them? Miss Denise Gardner.
Keep clapping. We had to hide the award from her so she wouldn't see it. But Ms. Gardner has been very influential. The reason why I'm a chief staff sponsor is because she fooled me and tricked me, told me I just need to mentor, and then next thing you know, she found her way out, and then I was in, but she has never left. So thank you. She helped organize what you're seeing today, and I think she did an incredible job with the organizers, so thank you. I will now call Anika Kentish to provide us with the closing remarks. Thank you, Director. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to take the advice of the judges for the last couple of days, in that if you're a good debater, good public speaker, you shouldn't have to be dependent on your script. So, I am going to do this without a script, as I should, right? First of all, Antigua team joke. First of all, I can't start with the acknowledgements without first acknowledging the fact that this debate series almost did not happen. And it would have been a shame if we were to allow another year to pass without the Leeward Islands debating competition. This institution has been near and dear to our hearts. Many of us have come through the debating. How many past debaters we have in this room? There are quite a few past debaters in this room, and many more across this globe doing great things. And I can't even begin to start calling names because then we'll never get out of this room. But it is an institution because it has been able to foster in many young men and women within the OECS a sense of purpose, confidence, leadership, an appreciation for public speaking, an appreciation for research, for diligence, for fact-checking and accuracy. But above all, it was an opportunity for fellowship. Many of us met some of our nearest and dearest friends at Leeward Island's debating competition. Many more, well, I can't say many more, but many met their spouses at the Leeward Islands debating competition. And, well, Mr. Arundel, I'm going to come to you for that story later. So it was important, and even though this pandemic was difficult for all of us and the different countries that are part of this institution, I am so glad that with the leadership of the Antigua State College, our principal, our vice principal, and others, we were able to step up and host this debate at such short notice. And we are incredibly grateful to all the people who stepped up, all the organizations who stepped forward and were able to donate of their time, donate of their talents, donate of their knowledge to help us get to this part. So, that said, I would now like to express congratulations to Team St. Martin. It was a hard-fought weekend of debating. Everybody is tired. I don't know if it's from the party last night or the debating, but everybody is tired. But I believe that for the debaters, especially those coming overseas, that it was time well spent. And I hope that you have grown coming out of this experience and that you will have many, many good memories to come. We haven't forgotten it. We haven't forgotten it. We'll get to that. So I want to acknowledge now the hard work of all the teams. Stand, the team, debating teams. Everybody, please give them a round of applause. Those teams. If you ever had any idea what it takes to research and script a debate, you will understand that these young men and women in front of you have done an incredible task while still maintaining their good grades and their other activities, and that is impressive. So congratulate them, because they have done something that most of their peers have not been able to do. Congratulations to all the debaters. To the staff sponsors, you are the backbone of this institution, because you are the ones who provide guidance, who chaperone the events. You are the ones that would say, well, maybe that phrase is not quite the way you'd want to say it in your speech. You know? You're the ones who have to make the hard decisions, okay, regarding how we are going to tackle a particular argument, or whether or not you're going to go out that night or be able to stay in and work on your script. And so, to the staff sponsors, we want to say thank you for all of the hard work that you put into it, because it's tireless nights, and I'm pretty sure that many of you don't sleep at night because you're always up thinking about the next script, about the arrangements, because especially when you're traveling with other people's children, you're always worried about all sorts of things. And so thank you so much for being the glue that holds this organization together. To our judges, it's not easy to find a panel of not just, I wouldn't even say competent, but we're looking at people who are basically on top of their respective fields, who can be impartial, and who can, most importantly, donate their time to come and judge a debate. And we want to say a sincere thanks to our judges here this evening and to the other judges who judged throughout this debating series. to those of you who came out to support. Some of you I know came because you have family or friends, and there's some of you that just soup for debate, right? Regardless of the reason, it's not easy to come up at this podium and to be out and see a familiar face, or maybe a not so familiar face, but someone there to cheer you on. It is really that gas that helps to keep these debaters going. Continue at any level, at any opportunity that you get, to support these youngsters and anybody who is interested in debate. Support them by your encouraging words. Support them by just showing up as you've done here tonight or throughout the weekend. So please know that we are grateful that you were able to join us here today. And for those of you who were not able to join us here in person, we know that you've been online watching, and we want to say a special thank you to you too, especially those watching from St. Martin, from Anguilla, from St. Kitts, from Nevis, Montserrat, even the BVI, and especially from the islands that were not able to make it this time around. We hope to see you next time. Another takeaway from the judges is to know when your time is up. And so before Mr. Mannix rings the bell on me, I would like to invite Mr. Brown back to the stage. And we are now going to present a very special trophy to a very special team who has captured the hearts of not just the audience, but the judges this particular series. And I would like to invite the members of Team St. Martin to come and claim your trophy. The bus. Thank you. From the time we get off the bus, you have exactly 30 minutes to change and be back at the, what do you call it? The kids club, so that you can be picked up and taken to dinner. 30 minutes. So just make sure when you get on the bus, 30 minutes from the time you get off the bus, because we want everybody to be there. Congratulations again to Team St. Martin.
30 minutes?